So preparation for meditation begins in the hours of the day that we are not meditating. We are practicing self-observation and self-remembering. We are living from the perspective of the Alm of life, and we are remembering our Divine Mother. And again, there's been a progression in these live streams for the past 6 weeks now. And meditation is sort of the capstone that comes along, because meditation has been mentioned in all of them. But we can't actually talk about meditation unless we first talk about prana and pranayama and give all the background that we've given over the last few weeks in order so that we could have the conversation that we were having today about what meditation isn't and the requirements for meditation. But now you've spent your day as best you can, remembering yourself, remembering your Divine Mother, observing yourself, one eye in, one eye out, right? In other words, what people call being mindful. And you've tried to be your best self. You've tried to treat others ethically. You've tried to treat yourself with self-respect and dignity. And you've tried to remain calm and relaxed and observant, but we're only human. And at the best of times, we've lost our temper, or we got frustrated, or we felt sad, or we felt gluttonous, or we were lazy, or proud, or fearful. But you had an opportunity to observe all that without judgment, without condemnation of yourself, without berating yourself. And if you do have a voice in your head that likes to berate yourself when you do something wrong, you observe that as well. And you recognize that that voice in your head is not who you are. So now it's the evening, it's the end of the day, you're winding down. Instead of watching that late night talk show or whatever, you decide, I'm going to take a half an hour or an hour and I'm going to meditate on my egos. I'm going to do what's called a retrospection meditation. Now, what does that entail? To retrospect on your day. Clearly, this is going to require visualization. It's going to require remembering, playing out scenarios that you experienced during that day, which is why self-observation is so important. Because if you don't observe yourself, you don't have any content, you don't have any material to work with in retrospection meditation. If you haven't observed your egos throughout the day, then how are you going to study them and analyze them and meditate on them? You can't, because you have nothing to work with. It's like we said last week about being in the courtroom and asking your Divine Mother to eliminate your egos. You're asking the judge and the jury to pass judgment without providing them any evidence. You have to give them the evidence. Well, how do you provide the evidence? That's why there's two aspects to prosecution. There's the prosecution and the clever attorney and all the arguments, the presentation of the evidence, the presentation of the case. But someone has to collect the evidence. Someone has to do the detective work. Remember, we talked about this last week. So meditation is the evidence and allowing for the consciousness to lead us in crafting the case and allowing the case to reveal itself to us, and the recounting of the evidence and the case and making of the case until, like we described last week, and what we did, we released a short on YouTube talking about the courtroom drama A Few Good Men, at the moment when Tom Cruise gets Jack Nicholson's character to admit that he ordered the code red. And it's this revelation, it's this spark, it's this moment where the entire courtroom is silenced because this skilled attorney just bested this veteran Marine general, career military man. So this is that moment that we are looking for in meditation. But this moment doesn't come from the mind. This is not an intellectual process. This is not any sort of deductive reasoning or logic or anything of the kind. This is a conscious, experiential analysis of looking at the evidence of being witness and going deeper into the truth of the moment at which we were possessed by those egos. Retrospection meditation is us returning to the scene of the crime and doing conscious forensic analysis, a conscious forensic work. And you think of what a forensic scientist, what a forensic examiner does at a crime scene. Do they intellectualize? Do they theorize? No, they gather evidence. They gather forensic evidence, fingerprints, DNA, body fluids, if that's the type of crime that they're investigating, and they bullet fragments. In other words, the hard evidence, the stuff that our Thomas needs, our innermost aspect of our being, the stuff of experiential knowledge, all of the clues. What made Sherlock Holmes such a remarkable character and such a compelling character was that he too was a forensic examiner. He had this incredible ability, and the way he was written by Arthur Conan Doyle, when he entered into a space, his abilities to consciously examine and be present and be aware and look at the evidence and his deductive reasoning, he was able to play out these scenarios and reconstruct the crime based on his forensic examination, his conscious awareness, when he looked at the angle of this and the way this happened and the way this was affected and that was affected and this person gave this testimony and that person gave that testimony, and how the timing of those testimonies lined up. And he was able to use deductive reasoning to put it all together based on the forensic evidence. Now, we don't want to use deductive reasoning in meditation, but the other aspect, the forensic examination, that's what we want. The deductive reasoning, the comprehension happens in consciousness. That's what we're waiting for. Our innermost Sherlock Holmes to put it all together and piece it all together for us and present us with the information in many ways. And this is a very, very real one-to-one literal translation of the Arthur Conan Doyle Sherlock Holmes archetype. We are Watson. This is why Watson exists. Watson does all the physical stuff. So Watson represents the physical body, and Sherlock Holmes represents the innermost. Now, Sherlock Holmes is the forensic examiner, and he does the deductive reasoning, meaning he puts it all together. He solves the case. In us, we do the forensic examination. We gather the evidence. So we, Watson, do the forensic examination, and our innermost Sherlock Holmes pieces it all together and presents the case. That's the comprehension. So it's not perfectly aligned because you couldn't actually write a detective story this way. So Arthur Conan Doyle had no choice. He had to combine the forensic examination and the deductive reasoning part, and he had to put that into his hero. But at least he kept Watson there as the relationship between the higher self and the mortal self. And Watson does all the physical stuff, right? And in these adventure stories, these Sherlock Holmes serials, there is an action component to it. Many times suspects need to be chased down. There are people trying to murder Sherlock Holmes, and it's always Watson. Watson is the one who carries the gun. He's the strong man. He's the muscle of the outfit, right? He's the muscle. Sherlock Holmes is the brains. Watson is the muscle, and that's the dynamic. But that archetypal dynamic, that's Frodo and Sam from Lord of the Rings, and so many other dualities where there is the more muscular or more earthy characters. He's not dumb, but he's a little dull, and he's certainly dull compared to the brains of the operation. It's Timon and Pumbaa from The Lion King in that particular duo. But anytime you have this like duo character situation, very often it's this archetypal dynamic where one's the smart one, but a bit of a weakling, and the other strong one, the brute, the muscle, is not quite so bright up there. And then that's reflected in Sherlock Holmes. So we can comprehend and understand these on this archetypal level, that during the day, when we're doing our self-observation, we're collecting evidence. We want to observe life and the world and everything around us with that forensic examiner eye, the eye of a forensic examiner, not a theorist, not a speculator, and certainly not a commentator, a cynic, or a critic. We just want to observe reality as it is, see things as they are, and see ourselves as we are, and how ourselves are reacting, how our mechanical ego, rational mind, and mechanical emotional reactions are reacting to the facts around us. And then if we happen to receive intuition and guidance and insight and inspiration and imagination, we also observe that. But we observe it objectively, forensically, so that later in meditation, we can perform the equivalent of deductive reasoning with the understanding that that process is a conscious one. It's not one that takes place in our mind. This is why we need meditation, because we need to get the mind under control, reined in, and we get the mind clear so that the mind can be the whiteboard onto which we can piece together the case. We start with this. We begin with this because the type of meditation that we're talking about here is the most important kind. So how do we get to that point? Now we know what our goal is. We know what the work that we're going to be doing in meditation is. Well, how do we actually go about doing this work? Well, you can't just close your eyes and start doing it.